Hey, my loves, blessings, blessings, blessings. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of Coffee at the Crossroads. I'm Afro Spiritual, of course, you already know that. I hope y'all doing well. So, today's episode, I hope you have your coffee, tea, water, whatever you're drinking. Hopefully, you drank your water today. Hope you have it ready because we're not going to spill the tea, but we're gonna sip a little bit, okay? We're gonna sip a little bit. That's what we're doing here. Good one for you. Specialities when it comes to hoodoo practice. Basically, do hoodoo has its own clergy, similar to the other ATRs and African diasporic practices, or no? And we are going to get into this. So let's start off with the beginning question. And I repeat, does hoodoo practice have its own clergy, similar to the other ATRs and diasporic practices? Because when it comes to the other practices, for example, I'm initiated into Lukumi Orisha practice, which is Afro-Cuban Orisha practice, also known as Santeria. We have our own clergy. For example, when you're on the outside of the practice, you're called an aleo, all right? Which is someone who not initiated, know nothing. Then you have Abarisha, someone who is initiated and is considered a devotee to Orisha practice. They may have received some Orishas along the way, but they're not crowned, as in they're not a priest or priestess. Then you have a Olarisha, which is someone who went through the crowning process to become a priest and or priestess. You have Babalaos, which in some ways is considered, high priest. But that's a different story. You have Oriates, which is master of ceremony. So what I'm saying is that for example, with Lukumi and Santeria, there is a clergy. Does hoodoo have that? In some ways, yes. But in other ways, no. And the reason why that is because if you are a hoodoo practitioner, let's take it way, way back in the day. If you were a hoodoo practitioner who was also part of the church, then yes, you are part of a clergy. But the clergy is based in the church. You could be a church mother. You might have been a pastor. You might have been, the first lady. You might have been an usher. You might be a deacon or a deaconess. All right? Just to name off some examples. But as a hoodoo practitioner, what if you're not part of the church? Where's your clergy then? It's there in some ways, but it is masked under the understanding of specialities. Now, when it comes to talking about these specialities, I need you to understand something. Doesn't matter if you're a root worker, conjurer, or whatever. No one speciality ranks you higher than the other person. In hoodoo, it is based off your experience and your merit, as in, can the community vouch for your work? All right? The only speciality that sits at the pinnacle above all else, that gives almost absolute authority over everything else, is the conjuring elder midwife. And we're going to get into that one, but a little later. I may have covered specialities in a way earlier episode on this podcast, but we're going to rehash it over just in case I did, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth, okay? So starting off, a root worker. A root worker is by far when most people start out when it comes to hoodoo practice after they developed a good enough relationship with their ancestors and they're actually being called to do work and to work. most folks immediately, they pick up roots and being a root worker. What is a root worker? A root worker is someone who works with the spiritual and magical properties of roots and herbs. Sometimes, more like all the time, places of power as well, as in the dirt and the essence of places. Some root workers will also work with animal parts. That's not always the case though, because some people are a little squeamish, but that's okay. Root worker works with the spiritual and magical properties of roots and herbs. So they will be the ones that will stick to maybe carrying a piece of high john in their pocket, making talismans out of different roots and herbs and hanging them up. Shoot, even to the extent of growing their own roots and herbs, which I do recommend every single hoodoo practitioner that is starting out to understand and grow your own roots and herbs to the best of your ability, depending on your area and the quality of your soil. I do highly recommend everyone to start growing your own stuff, form your own relationship with the spirit of these plants and herbs now. Trust me, it will hit a lot better when you shape your own relationship. Okay? Work with what you got. Keep it simple. That is a root worker in very blunt and layman's terms. Most folks will hear this and be like, well, dang, that just sounds like, someone who's just practicing green witchcraft. We are going to get into it into this episode, okay? Talking about witches and witchcraft versus hoodoo. We are. So I'm just going to warn you right now. Please do not take any offense whenever I talk about witches and witchcraft from a hoodoo perspective. I'm not dogging a practice. I'm just giving you the scoop. Okay? Moving right along into a conjure. This is an area of practice that some people have an affinity for and is called to. Here's the thing though. Many people are root workers in hoodoo practice. Not everyone is a conjurer. Yes. When it comes to hoodoo, calling hoodoo practice conjure, root work, working roots. There's many names to describe the practice. We're talking about specialities here, so keep with the nuance. Many people are root workers. Not everyone is a conjurer. For a conjurer, and I may have said this before, a conjurer works with, knows the science of working with the spirits of the dead and spirits that are not their ancestors. Conjurers still do work with their ancestors and venerate their ancestors, but they have the extra added understanding of navigating the realm of spirits outside of their ancestors. A conjurer could do everything that a root worker can do, but a root worker cannot do what a conjurer can do. To be a conjurer requires you to have an affinity and a unique connection to the realm of the dead itself. Some folks are called to be a conjurer. Some people are born with that affinity due to their close proximity to death or the dead. Okay? Some folks become conjurers due to the uniqueness of spiritual warfare. As in, for example, you are an innocent person. You do not practice whatsoever. Someone gets a hair up their butt and they send a spirit after you. Mess your life up, and the only way to rectify it is by you becoming a practitioner, because that spiritual attack woke you up to the other side. Something that wasn't for you in the first place, but now You have no choice but to step into that role just to defend yourself. I've seen it happen to some folk. It's not pretty, and it's unfortunate, because they didn't even want it in the first place, but now they have to step into it, and they have to learn. Conjure is a science. Being a conjurer is a science. It takes years of study and understanding to be a conjurer, because the margin for error being a conjurer is much thinner than being a root worker. For example, being a conjurer can lead you into some dark places, but conjure is not only a speciality that can be worked for harm, but it can also be worked for good, like everything. But some folks, when they become a conjurer or go into the conjuring aspects of hoodoo practice, the first thing that they think about is all the things that they can do to harm someone. I'm going to tell you something right now, the way my elders told me, especially my grandmother. If you have the audacity to work death and send it after someone, then you better have the bravery to face death yourself. If you're not willing to die yourself, why are you working death on somebody? Point blank, period. If you can't handle it, then you have no business conjuring it. You have no business working it. Because as a conjurer, you will understand the intimate relationship of the law of exchange and the preservation of balance. All right? Moving right along, a two-headed doctor. Now, there's many iterations when it comes to a two-headed doctor now. Two-headed doctor, I'll go and give you two versions. A two-headed doctor is someone who is both a root worker and a conjurer. That's one way of being a two-headed doctor. Another way of being a two-headed doctor is someone who knows the magical or spiritual understanding of roots and herbs and the medicinal understanding of roots and herbs. Now, the medicinal understanding, that's a root doctor. We're going to get into that. But the way the grown folks say it, a two-headed doctor is someone who in one hand works with the power of God and in the other hand knows the ways of the devil. Able to do good work and bad work. As easy as they're able to bless you, they're able to damn you real quick. That's a two-headed doctor. Someone who works right in the middle, balance. The totality of that balance and the understanding of that balance. It takes time to understand to be a proficient root worker. And it takes much longer to be a proficient conjurer. It takes a skosh even longer to step in and be a proficient two-headed doctor and not let yourself get carried away with what you're able to do working with the ancestors and the spirits. Most two-headed doctors, I kid you not, they're in the church. Take a look at your pastor. Take a look at your church mother. I kid you not. Truly, I kid you not. As I said in a previous podcast, most curses be flying around in the house of God. Be flying around in the church. They be over here trying to be saying that they're going to pray for you and bless you, but instead they speak a whole word on you that just mess you up. Kid you not, two-headed doctors be living up in the church. Truly, utterly. But on the flip side, a root doctor is someone who works with the medicinal properties of roots and herbs. They will be the ones that know the proper remedy to be able to take care of whatever is ailing you. Root doctors are the ones that back in the day, grown folk who wasn't able to go to the hospital or were too scared to go to the hospital because history with the medical field always killing black folk and high mortality rate, which is, if you have not read, not read, but you went to my podcast talking about the medical field and black folk, black apartheid. Honey, go take a listen. Root doctors are the ones that we went to, and they fixed us up right and good every single time. Right and good. Truly, truly, truly. Now, a root doctor do know how to work the spiritual magical properties of roots and herbs like a root worker, but a root doctor takes it a step further and actually treat medical issues. Yes, some folk will call them a medicine woman or a medicine man, but you have to understand the word medicine woman or medicine man, that's a Native American term. And depending on who you talking to, that using that word to describe a root doctor can be appropriative. It can be, so be careful about referring to yourself as a medicine woman or medicine man. All right? Because medicine doesn't just mean literal treating injuries and ailments, but medicine, Native American spirituality is something spiritual now. Okay? Not saying that a root doctor and what they do is not spiritual, just saying be careful of the words that you use. All right? Now, I will say there is some church-specific specialities, church-specific ones. Being an intercessor, someone who's able to pray on the behalf of another. Someone who is a faith healer, lay on hands, being able to perform healing through the power of faith itself with the strength of the ancestors behind you. Seers, which is another word to say, honey, you're a spiritual medium, but you're saying that you're a seer, you see things. There are church-specific specialities, all right? But the creme de la creme, in my opinion, is the midwife, y'all. Is the midwife. Because there's some folk that do not like it when I say this, but it is because of the women of hoodoo practice that this practice still goes on and survive today. I kid you not, especially men, even myself, a male who practices hoodoo. I did not learn from another man, I learned from women. I learned from the women of my line. Not to say that there's some families where it's passed down through the man and through the father's blood, but more times than not, it is from the women of the practice in which folks learn. Truly, most men out there, like I said, they learn from women. So to my ladies, if you're dealing with a spiritual man that practices hoodoo, because sometimes these spiritual men, you have to be careful with them. You're dealing with a spiritual man who's not doing you right and doing all these works on you and everything. Honey, don't look at him. Look at his mama. Look at his grandma. Look at his auntie, because I'm pretty sure, I'm telling you, that's where he learned it from. Wondering why you cannot get him out of your head. Anyway, the midwife. The midwife in hoodoo practice did not just birth babies, all right? The midwife, the conjuring midwife, she knew the ways of a root doctor. She knew the ways of a root worker. If need be, she knew the ways of the conjurer. With age, with wisdom, with time, with experience, the midwife reached the pinnacle of hoodoo practice, encompassing basically all things in which you could do with the practice. Because, to those that don't know, there are certain things in hoodoo practice that only a woman can do that a man can't. And that boils down to the simple fact of a man is not a womb carrier. There is a magic. There is a spirit, a spiritual force behind the fact a woman bears the womb, a womb bearer, a womb carrier. That's a certain spirituality there in hoodoo practice that a man just cannot seem to measure up to. Don't get me wrong, the man is a spark. There are certain works that men can do that is quite potent, but The pinnacle of hoodoo practice lies with the woman. Kid you not. Kid you not. And anyone who wants to argue that, reach out to me via email or in my IG. We can discuss and debate about it. The midwife, mother to the community usually. Mother to the community. It was actually because of the midwives and everything that most hoodoo folk and practitioners was able to get their supplies. There was a network chain that was underground between mortuaries, midwives, swampers to be able to get certain things now. But, of course, with modern day, laws and the authority figures and everything shutting all that down, not as easy to get certain things, if you know what I mean. Now, understand when it comes to these so-called specialities in hoodoo practice, you don't just get to up and pick which one you want to do. Like with everything else in hoodoo practice, you're called to it based off of who you are and also your natural talents and skills. You're called to it. How do you know if you're called? Honey, that's the thing. If you have to question if you're being called, then honey, you're not true and you're not called. Because being called to a certain speciality in hoodoo, you know it through and through in every single fiber of your being. There is a certainty and conviction behind it. You know. There is no question. Some people, however, do not answer the call when they're truly being called, and their life get flipped upside down until they answer the call. I've witnessed it with certain midwives who had the call to be the midwife, and it was calling them so dearly. They lost family members, they lost friends, they lost jobs, they lost prosperity and abundance, everything in between, until they came to me for a session, and I had to tell them, you're being called to being midwife, and what's ailing you is that you're not answering the call. Sent them on the way to a midwife to get them trained up. They came back a few years later. Baby, they were thriving. Working as a certified doula and midwife, and also being a hoodoo practitioner. Baby, let me tell you. Now, there is a certain kind of speciality that is not really spoken about, that you must be wary of. My family call them shadow folk. Why do we call them shadow folk? Because their morals are misplaced, and what they work with is darker forces. These are the kind of folk that will not think twice to put a root on you, as in throw work at you just cause. They won't. They won't hesitate. And if you're wondering about the justification, and also, will things come back onto them? That's the thing with shadow folk. They understand and they know how to be able to pawn off that debt to where it does not come back to them. They have a certain deal packed with a certain spirit that as long as they keep appeased and fed, they can run around amok doing whatever they want. They know how to throw their debt onto other people. And these are certain kind of practitioners where you go to them, things will be fine and good for a moment, but the moment that you don't come to them for services or anything like that, or you say something that they don't like, your life starts to go downhill real fast, real quick. With folks like these, their morals are misguided and construed, and they pass off as every other practitioner out there. So how do you spot them? Baby, your discernment is going to be key. Truly it is. Your discernment is going to be key. That's how you save yourself. It really is. Your spirits and your ancestors will let you know. That's how you save yourself. And if you fall out with a practitioner and you think that they might be one of these shadow folk, honey, find yourself a credible practitioner, fast and quick, to get things resolved and rectified. That's all you can do. But on to the interesting subject, talking about witches and witchcraft. Because a lot of people like to say that hoodoo is witchcraft. Baby, no, it's not. I'll tell you right now, no, it is not witchcraft. What we do is not witchcraft. Some people will say it is. No, it's not. It's not. And the reason why it's not is because, I'm sorry, this modern day understanding when it comes to witches and witchcraft, y'all need to understand now. Y'all need to understand. Just because it's non-Abrahamic does not mean it's witchcraft. Hoodoo is unique because it's both Abrahamic in a sense because of the travesty of Christianity and Christian oppression when it comes to African traditional beliefs. But hoodoo at the same time is not Abrahamic because in origins it's African. Hoodoo is not witchcraft. Because in the understanding of hoodoo practice with our folklore, witchcraft, I'm not saying it's of the devil. Witchcraft is something that is worked and done by a witch, which is known as a boo hag in hoodoo practice. What is a boo hag? A boo hag usually is, boo hag is a woman who during the day looks like a woman. But at night, she takes off her skin and she will follow her target home and look for a means to come into their home. And she will ride, literally sit on top of the person and ride them and drain them of their life essence, of their breath. And if you happen to scream or get startled by a boo hag, without knowing it, you let them into your body and they're able to wear your skin. Boo hag and witches is synonymous in hoodoo practice. Because when it comes to witches and witchcraft, with the history of hoodoo, witches were palm-colored folk, white people, because hoodoo was born in a time of slavery and oppression. And yes, no lie, white men was a danger, but look back at the history when it comes to black people and hoodoo practice. White women were the biggest danger during the times of slavery and oppression, because all it took was a white woman crying tears, black man dead. So when it comes to the history and also the lore of hoodoo, a witch is a boo hag. Being a witch is not a good thing. Witchcraft is not a good thing in the context of hoodoo practice. Therefore, hoodoo is not witchcraft. That is the understanding that you must keep. So yes, you will hear and see hoodoo practitioners not refer to them as a witch. Because they're not. Some of our ancestors, depending on who you are and your ancestors, will not be okay with you referring to yourself as a witch. They'll pop you upside the head faster than you can blink. Depending on your ancestors and what your ancestors are okay with, your ancestors will not be okay with you practicing witchcraft. Some people's folks, they're okay with them practicing witchcraft and doing both witchcraft and hoodoo, but that's on them. I'm speaking generality now. Even if you go to other areas of the diaspora, a witch is not a good thing. Even if you go to Africa with our traditional religions, the understanding of being a witch and practicing witchcraft, It's not seen as a good thing. But in motherland Africa is witches revered. They're respected. And what they're able to do, they're respected. But just because they're revered and respected does not always mean it's seen as a good thing. So when it comes to African traditional religions and diaspora practices, y'all really need to separate this understanding of, oh, you practice a spiritual system that involves you moving and working with certain spirits and energies. Oh, it's witchcraft. No. Oh, you're a witch. No. It is one of those things where you have to ask, well, question, do you refer to yourself as a witch? That way I know how to refer to you. That's perfectly fine to ask that question, but don't blanket everything as witchcraft all because it's non-Abrahamic. Okay? So with that understanding, I hope y'all enjoyed this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope, sipping a little tea and not spilling it with me. I hope y'all enjoyed this. Once again, thank you for being here at Coffee at the Crossroads, and I'll catch you in the future with next week's episode. God bless now.